On Sunday, we talked about how to recover from errors in decision making. And I told a story about a time early in my ministry when I had witnessed a man lying, and I tried to work with him in ministry anyway, and how that turned out, which is not very well. So we talked about that. It raised a number of questions about trust, about the issues of how to establish trust, how to mend trust, and who to put your trust in. Here's the first question. If all humans are flawed, including me, and some are in positions of authority despite their flaws, how are we to choose with whom we act and how we act when there are only flawed options? Well, this is certainly the season when we're all trying to figure that out. The most glaring example of this problem of only flawed options is our political scene right now. And that really is kind of a backdrop for a lot of the questions that we're getting. Let me recommend to you a book, but before I do that, just to comment on kind of the premise of the question and the premise of Proverbs. The premise of the question is there's only flawed options. The premise of Proverbs is exactly the same. You're in a fallen world. It's dangerous. It's full of lies. It's full of bad actors. And some of them look really good. They don't seem to be bad at all. And so the whole premise of Proverbs is there's this illusion that's constantly being thrown up to you, whether it's in the marketplace or from the king or the king looking out from his throne at his courtroom. They're nothing but shadows, illusions, smoke and mirrors. And so how do you make decisions in the midst of all of that? So I don't think, all that to say, the premise of this question, that there are only flawed options, I don't think that's a huge problem. I think it's just reality. And I think the scriptures, Proverbs in particular, are designed to help us with that reality. So that said, if there are only flawed options, then who do you put your trust in? I think the clear message of Proverbs is you've got to look at patterns of behavior, and you've got to stop rationalizing what the people around you are doing, making excuses for them. In a sense, it is a good thing to try to understand where people are coming from and maybe understand why they do some of the bad things they do. But I would just say, that doesn't solve any problems. Just because you understand why a person is the way he or she is doesn't mean you should trust him. Doesn't mean you should trust her. Doesn't mean you should commit anything valuable into that person's hands. So, it is a very good thing, a charitable thing to try to understand people's frailties. But in terms of decision making, you still have to do what is right. You still have to commit your resources into the hands of people who are safe. And particularly when you're responsible for other people, your children, your spouse, your grandchildren, in my case, a congregation, in a teacher's case, the students in a classroom. When you're responsible for those other people, you don't just give away trust to people who are not worthy of it, no matter how understandable their frailties might be or their character failings might be. We have reached a place in our society where we are simply incapable of making a judgment call and saying it doesn't matter why this person is not worthy of trust. They're not worthy of trust, and so we're not going to repose trust in this person. And so here's the book recommendation about this. It's a book called A Time to Build. It's by Yuval Levin. And it is a book about institutions. Levin diagnoses a lot of the problems with our institutions that they have ceased to be character shaping cauldrons where you get put in the pressure of this institution, and whatever the mission and purpose of that institution is, you cease to be shaped by that institution. You cease to be formed by that institution. And instead, you treat the institution as your platform. You modify the institution to suit your ambitions, your purposes, your needs, or the needs that you perceive in whatever area you're working in. And Levin basically says, if you look at Congress, if you look at higher education, education generally, even medicine, if you look at the social sciences, if you look at churches, what you find is there is a degradation of institutional purpose and mission, so that when you become part of that institution, you're no longer shaped by that institution. You're seeking to mold the institution to you. And Levin says it's time to rebuild institutions. It's time to cease to tolerate this kind of platforming, where someone gets elected to Congress and then just kind of treats it like their own personal stage to perform from, and has no regard for the norms of that institution. Institutional norms are needed. They need to be strong. They need to be wisely formulated. And in our time, even in the life of our church, they need to be reset. Those boundaries need to be redrawn, defended, and they need to start shaping people. And so this is a time when, in order to make a decision about whether we can trust someone, we are really asking the question, are you willing to be shaped by the institution we're part of? In our case, a church called Bethel Grove. Are you willing to be shaped by this institution and its mission? If not, the level of trust we will put in you goes down, because you're telling us that these relationships here at this church are basically tools in your toolbox, that the people around you and the institution itself is your instrument for achieving something personal, some ambition or some cause that you support. I think it's a key marker, and I would recommend that you read that book, A Time to Build by Yuval Levin, and I would say consider it carefully. Consider it at the church level, consider it politically, and consider it in terms of educational institutions. We've got to stop trusting climbers who want to be celebrities, who want platforms, who want attention. Their day needs to be over, and real people, the normies, need to take over. I will just tell you that I long ago lost interest in being lectured about civility and civil institutions from celebrities in media, reporters, commentators, analysts, anyone on a YouTube channel where they're just trying to exert their influence on society. I'm done. If you really believe in civility, practice it locally in the institutions that you're part of. That will show trustworthiness, and that is the measure that I am using in our situation at BG. So I think that's a very deep question, a very important question, but there are two others. Second question is, how do we befriend or love a liar? That's a very interesting question. Friendship is a big subject. One that doesn't get as much attention as it should, especially in a period so characterized by loneliness as ours. Friendship is a kind of bonding of soul and mind and spirit. It's unity. And I would say in response to this question, you can't really have a friendship with a liar, because the liar won't let you. The liar is constantly creating darkness and division between your mind and his or her mind. And so it's not a question of would we like to befriend a liar. If you truly have a liar in your life, as somebody who just cannot tell the truth, and these people are out there, they lie about verifiable things. They lie about inconsequential things. I've known people who couldn't help it. They just made stuff up on the fly about their lives and told stories about themselves that were simply made up on the spot. And there are degrees of this, but I would say as much as you might care for that person and want to befriend that person is not going to let you, because the foundation of friendship is truth and unity and a deep sense that, we're on the same page. And where that is not possible, friendship is not possible. Stay tuned at BG, because in the spring we're going to talk about friendship. We're going to talk about building these kinds of close relationships as part of an emphasis on community. And we're also going to talk about sins of the tongue, truthfulness in the things that we say, because Proverbs and the wisdom of God has a lot to say about this. How do you love a liar? Hold them accountable for the truth. There's a time when you need to be a brick wall in someone's life and to say, I know you think you're telling the truth, but what you're saying is not true. And I'm not going to go with you down that path. And it is hard to play that role. It is hard to be in someone's life and have to take that line. It's painful, but it's necessary. And sometimes the witness of love to someone is telling them the truth and not going with them in their fantasy world, whether it's well-motivated or malicious. Either way, we are not here to hold one another's hands and confirm everything that we say. That's really not our role in life. It's very dangerous, and we need to have a resolve that in truthfulness, in being truthful, souls and lives are at stake. And it's a very important thing. So that question, how do we befriend and love a liar? There's a lot of tragedy in that question. Here's a third question. Given how much anger, division, and lack of trust there is in our country, how can we as Christians help to mend the divide? The problems are so widespread and deeply rooted that it seems like an overwhelming task. It is an overwhelming task. So I have two thoughts about this, I guess. One is, in terms of the political divide in our country and the distrust that is behind it, I think it would be well for Christians to focus on local issues of local politics. If that is your bent, if your calling is civic leadership, and lots of Christians have this calling, I would take your focus off national issues and place your focus and your activities on local issues, building local coalitions to solve problems, tell each other the truth, listen to each other, and enact compromises to get things done. Here's why I say that. our nation is designed for self-government. It's predicated on that basic idea. And until we start governing ourselves locally, we're kidding ourselves about change happening in our country. Change is only going to happen in our country as lots of local coalitions start to build independent of each other around different issues and even with different approaches. And those local compromises and coalitions rise at the congressional district level. Then they rise at the state assembly and state senate level, the governor level. They do a lot of work in law enforcement and civic leadership in that realm. They do a lot of work in nonprofits and coalitions of nonprofit leadership. And so all of this bubbles up, and those coalitions start to take shape nationally, and that's when things change. That's when our national politics becomes different. And this has happened many times in our nation's history. And I would just commend to you the approach of paying closer attention to local politics and mending the divide right here around local issues, around issues that affect your neighbors and your fellow business people and your colleagues in school and your students. Build those coalitions. Tell the truth. Make promises and keep them. Be a straight arrow in those settings. That's how you mend. That's how you mend trust and rebuild it. Let me put it differently. You can't rebuild trust on big things. You rebuild trust on small things. And especially in our political system, it was not designed to make massive, big changes that you can bet the farm on. It was designed to take a lot of independent, little, local changes and turn them into a kind of broad national decision. It's slow, it's difficult, it's frustrating, but it's how our system works. And I think one of the reasons we're so frustrated with our system right now is that it's working quite well. Our system is refusing to give us an out on these problems. It is forcing people to say, well, we're not going to gain absolute national power. And, even though the elections last week certainly went the Republican way, we're already seeing this week how many limits there are on that. And that's a good thing. That's our system working. And so our system is going to continue to produce split decisions and to emphasize our divisions until we locally say, well, this is our town, it's our county, it's our state, let's govern ourselves here. And that's really where trust lives and where it grows. And over time, that will change the country. But, this is a generational project by now. It's not something that's going to get solved in 4 years or 8 years. This is a 20-year issue. So those are some thoughts on those very thoughtful questions. Thank you for them, and I hope to see you again on Sunday.